This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we'll discuss psychological and emotional issues common in today's world and what to do about them. I'm Dr. Margaret, and SelfWork is a podcast dedicated to you taking just a few minutes today for your own self-work. Hello and welcome back to SelfWork. I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford, and I'm so glad you're here. There are some people who can take the most difficult situations and find the humor in them. Cathy Sikorski is one of those people. I met her several years ago at a Midlife Bloggers Association meeting and became an instant admirer. I tried several years ago to have her as one of my first guests, but didn't know what I was doing and completely bungled the recording. So she's patiently waited until I knew what I was doing, and in her very positive outlook kind of way said it was the perfect time now. Who is Cathy Sikorski? She's been a significant caregiver for the last 20 years, but in addition to that, she's been a practicing attorney in her own practice, dealing largely in elder law, with over 12 years of education in issues dealing with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. She began her legal career in general practice in a small town where she grew up and was known to a large contingent of the population through her family. Many of her clients were older adults, which lent her practice to dealing with elder issues. During that time, Cathy went on leave to attempt stay-at-home mothering and ended up staying at home and mothering all kinds of people. First, her Nana came to stay, and there have been many others that needed her care. She's also the author of several books, the first being Showering with Nana, another Who Moved My Teeth. Today we're going to discuss two more that outline very eloquently how to talk to your loved ones about their end-of-life plans, or what needs to happen when dementia is in the picture. The name of one of the books is 12 Conversations, How to Talk to Almost Anyone About Long-Term Care Planning. Not the most fun conversation to have, but a vital one. Before y'all meet Cathy, let's first hear from AG1. Our next partner is AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it literally every day. I gave AG1 a try because I wanted a single solution that supports my entire body and covers my nutritional bases every day. I wanted better gut health, a boost in energy, immune system support. I take it in the morning before starting my day, and I make sure and leave it out for my husband because he tends to forget. I love knowing that I'm starting my day so incredibly well, and I wouldn't change a thing because it's really helped me the last 2 or 3 years I've taken it. And here's a fact. Since 2010, they've improved their formula 52 times in the pursuit of making this nutrition supplement possible and the best it can be. So if you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/selfwork, and that's a new link, drinkag1.com/selfwork. Check it out. And so now I proudly and finally introduce you to Cathy Sikorski. Well, you and I have known each other, Cathy, for 10 years, maybe 9.
I know, a long time. We've grown up a lot in the years that it's been. So I'm going to go, a long time.
Yeah, a long time. Well, I think I met you when we were all meeting at Midlife Boulevard and that kind of thing, right? Right.
Yep.
That's what I remember.
In Nashville, I'm going to say.
Yeah. That huge hotel. It was great. And I have loved your work since. Tried to have you on as one of the first guests of SelfWork, and I had no idea what I was doing technically, and I botched it, and I practically was in tears and said, I'll have to have you back on. And 6 years later, here we are.
Hey, but a lot has happened in 6 years. And honestly, right, this is the universe, because now is a really good time for us to talk. I have, and you have, refocused our work many times.
Right.
And the refocus has helped us be better Sherpas for people women especially, but people in what we're trying, the message that we're trying to get out. Right. And so I'm happy that it took 6 years. I really am, because I'm better focused about what I want to say.
Well, you are incredibly kind. Your first book that I read was Showering with Nana.
Yeah.
And it brought tears to my eyes, and I just loved that book. For those of you who don't know Cathy Sikorski's work, basically, I mean, she's gone, and I want you to tell your story, but you've gone from being someone who was caring for a lot, as I understand it, gone from a family member, a friend who was caring for a lot of people who were getting older and having those kinds of problems, to then you earned your elder law degree and really have changed your whole life. And so I greatly admire that, because it's something where you have said, let me take what life has given me and then be able to have the experience on a lot of different levels, both personal and professional, so that I can really help other people. And I wanted you on because I think this is so important, that we talk about elder care and everything you talk about. You have 2 new books that you sent, fairly new, Who Moved My Teeth, which after I read this, I peppered my husband with questions about, do we have that? Do we have this? Do we have this? And then I read until about 10:30 last night, 12 Conversations, How to Talk to Almost Anyone About Long-Term Planning. And so I have both of those books here with questions. So tell us a little bit about your story first.
So yeah, I'm so happy that you brought up the fact that what happened in my life really informed and changed the way I decided to have a career. Yeah. Because I think especially women, we get very feeling trampled down about what life is throwing at us and how we can't go do the thing we thought we wanted to do or what we should be doing or how we thought life should let us do thing, right? Wow, we feel very trampled by caregiving, by caring for our children, our parents, our spouses or whatever. And yet it's an expectation that, right or wrong, and a lot of times wrong, comes with just being a female, right? Mm-hmm. And so I became a caregiver for 8 different family and friends over the last 30 years. And honestly, this is a job for me that happened out of certainly love and respect for people in my life. My grandmother, my aunts, my very good friend who fell down a flight of stairs and had no one to care for her and had a traumatic brain injury. My brother-in-law, my sister, passed away and he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the worst possible kind. And so I became his primary caregiver. So my only point being about that you made, which was, there were times when I was mad about that. Like, this isn't what I want to be doing. This isn't what I think my life is supposed to be about, right? I have dreams. I have aspirations. And it turns out that that's exactly what my dreams and aspirations were all about. It was taking my life experience and turning it into the person I wanted to be, which was this speaker, author, educator about something really important that I learned that I could share with people to help make their lives better.
Was that even close to anything that you had predicted or dreamed or wondered about, that maybe that's the direction your life would go? Was it anywhere close?
No. Well, I didn't know it, but yes, because here's the thing. I wanted to be an actress. Okay. I was a theater major in college for a couple years. And then I realized 2 things. I had a boyfriend. I couldn't spend any time with him. And I wasn't sure I could make any money being an actress, right? It's the poor girl's way to go about it. Maybe, I don't know, lots of people make money and lots of money. But so then my other dream was to be a lawyer, which is exactly what I did. But in my mind, it was the Clarence Darrow, the big trial lawyer who was going to save and help people by, making these great trial things where, like you see on television, the big surprise ending or whatever, all of which, of course, has an acting component to it, may I add, right?
Yes, of course.
So what that means for me, really what that meant for me is two things. I really wanted to help people, and I wanted to be in front of audiences in some fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Margaret, that's exactly what I do. Wow. That's exactly what I do. Exactly.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving me goosebumps.
Me too.
And that's, how, when you say you got angry about it, it's, I mean, that's a lot of people to be primary caregiver for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that? Was there no one else? Did you just do it better than everyone and you knew you did? Was it just, that's the way your life turned out?
Everybody in your audience probably is a caregiver on some level. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. And the caregiving, I say the joke is the train comes to my door and stops and everybody gets off. I mean, two things happened. Number one, like my grandmother in that book, my first book, Showering with Nana, she came to live with me and I had a 2-year-old at the time. Mm-hmm. So I had a 92-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Which is a hilarious book, by the way.
Thank you. They definitely wanted to, gang up on me and see what they could get away with. And it worked a lot. But that experience then led to, other family members, both on my side and my husband's side, needing care. And as I'm doing this, as you remarked, I was a small town lawyer at the time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as I started to formulate my practice around elder law, which is really kind of a new area of law. Mm-hmm. It is not the ancient law of, criminal law and trial law and even estate law, which goes back hundreds of years. Elder law is new because it's about Medicare and Medicaid and nursing homes and, things that have been growing and growing and growing during our lifetime. Mm-hmm. But I needed to know this stuff because the people I was taking care of were old people. And then I was taking care of not so old people, but who were also in a system of Medicare and Medicaid because of their illnesses, their dramatic illnesses or whatever. So I just had to learn it. Sure. And then I became an elder lawyer, because of that.
Is that an actual specific law degree?
It isn't. It isn't a law degree. There are certifications that you can take. Yes, absolutely. And there are classes now. I would say they're fairly new in law school. Law schools are now offering elder law classes. And it is definitely a specialty in law for sure. Okay. So that's really what I do. I try to teach everyone out there why you need an elder lawyer. What is it that you need and what is different about elder law as opposed to any other?
You make that point very well. Again, but the point being that I think some of us do go on autopilot, even if we're aware of these kinds of things. And then other people just simply don't want to think about it. I grew up the daughter of a funeral director, and death was a part of life. I heard about people dying every day. And so I have a little bit of a different take on it, I think, because of that. But certainly in my practice now for a long time, mortality is something that an illness and losing control. It's something that we all fear so much. Look at what's happening to Bruce Willis right now. He's taking the very brave step of letting some information out about it, frontotemporal dementia or something like that. Mm-hmm, And so, good for him, but it's also very frightening. And I think probably how many people have said, I'd rather just be hit by a bus than develop Alzheimer's.
So here's the thing, though. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, that's the problem. Right. It doesn't work that way. And by ignoring at your peril, getting your affairs in order, you really make it hard for the people who love you.
That's right.
And that's not what you want to do. I really believe in my heart that is not what you want to do. You don't want to make it hard for the people who love you. And so, especially in my world where I deal with people who are sick, I deal with people who are incapacitated. So Bruce Willis is a perfect example of being so generous of spirit, his family, to share this diagnosis with the world, which is quite frankly a horrific diagnosis. Yes, it is. To say, we've been dealing with this, we now know what it is, and we're going to continue to deal with it. But you can absolutely pretty much ensure that they have their affairs in order. So in other words, during the journey, when they were trying to figure out the problem, they made sure that their powers of attorney were in order, that those powers of attorney let them do what they want them to do. Because it's like you said, sure, you sort of know about it, you hear about it, you have it, but did it really do what you wanted it to do? Which is why I talk about it more specifically in the book, so people know what questions to ask. What kinds of questions am I supposed to be asking about this document that somebody has shoved under my nose to sign, right?
Let's talk a little bit about, I did not read all of Who Moved My Teeth, but the picture of the book that I got was certainly, there's a lot of information about exactly what you just said at the beginning of the book. And then the latter part of the book is more, it's sort of practical, pragmatic.
Practical advice for caregivers, for really when you're stepping into it. How do I talk to my person who, how do I spend a whole day with someone who's quite frankly making me insane with the same questions, or, what kinds of things can I do? Why are they acting crazy? Maybe they have a urinary tract infection and I never knew about that.
I was going to ask you about UTIs because that's really a big deal. Before we move on too much, there's a young man I worked with several years ago now. He lived on a farm kind of complex. All his family lived together, and he adored his grandmother. And she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she refused to talk with him about her dying. And I'll never forget, this young man was tough as a brick, and reared on a farm and the fact that he even came to therapy was a minor miracle. But he said, it's just like there's this, she was dead by the time he came in. And he said, I never got to talk to her about how I was going to miss her and what I loved about her. And I know that's a separate topic in many ways from some of the more legal things, but not really. It's all intertwined, isn't it?
Yes, and I love that, because these legal things are an act of love.
Yes.
This is an act of love, both for you as the person who is doing it and for you as a person who's saying, Mom, Dad, I want to spend time with you. I just had this conversation with 3 daughters who have a podcast as well, which we talked about doing that. But they said we had to step in so quickly as caregivers. We didn't get the end of times as daughters.
Right.
And I have read this again and again, that people would so much more rather be grandsons and daughters and loving spouses rather than caregivers trying to deal with paperwork and hospitals and doctors and anything you can do to make the hard road, the legal road, the paper, anything that you can do to make that crisis part of the road smoother gives you time to be a loved one.
Oh, that's a great point, and such a significant one. The other book I talked about, 12 Conversations, really does pick out, how do you talk to your dad? How do you talk to your mom? How do you talk to your siblings? How do you talk to your children? And I loved a lot, because you actually then have dialogue that we can read and go along with it, and you make jokes along the way. I love one of them called, I dog-eared it. What was it? You said, let me see. Oh, it says, as you go through this chapter, you'll begin to understand that although this basic paperwork is crucial, it is the tip of the iceberg, and we are on the caregiving Titanic.
Wow, that was good.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? And you're right. It's inevitable. You know what's going to happen eventually. I've been on a hospice board or I was on it for many years, and, heard a lot of stories about how people handle palliative care and hospice, and was thinking about that as I read your books. And, but I love the specificity of what you talk about in Who Moved My Teeth, for example. You literally have a list of 60 ways to be more patient. Everything from count to 10 to drink a large glass of water, change what you're doing, take a bath, put gum in your mouth. I love that. Tell a joke, take a picture, order food, put lotion on you or your loved one, clean out a drawer, go through family photos, dance, bake, color in a coloring book, tell a story. I mean, it's just I love the specificity of this.
And that gives not only you control, but your loved one, right? So whether they have dementia or they're just ill or they're just homebound or, everyone doesn't have dementia, Margaret, caregiving isn't just for those people with dementia. Like it extends itself to lots of different kinds of people and their challenges. But if you are, for instance, coloring with them, it just gives them some control. Here's your page. Here's my page. You can pick your crayon. You can pick your colored pencil. And even that little tiny weird thing of the two of you sitting there, adult coloring was a big deal several years ago, right?
Especially during the pandemic. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And or puzzling, right? Putting puzzles together. It's because two things. Number one, it's kind of like, what's that called? Parallel play. Mm-hmm. Right. So you're both doing something, you're both feeling in control of the situation, and yet you're not necessarily having to engage, which sometimes disengaging is good. Right.
Yeah, sure.
So any of those things is yes, certainly helpful to you as the caregiver, but it's probably also helpful to the person you're caring for as well. Mm-hmm. And they have much less control over the situation than you do. Let's be honest.
And them accepting that. I recently had a benign tumor removed, and my son, who's 28, came and stayed for 3 weeks to help take care of me because it was a more serious surgery and that kind of thing. And we sat down and had a talk about, okay, let's talk about what's in our future. And, you are our only child, and, what comes to you now? And he looked at us and said, well, I think I'm probably going to have to move to Fayetteville, Arkansas, or y'all going to have to move where I am, one of the two, eventually. And we talked about timing, and I decided after reading your book that the next time he comes, I'm going to ask him to stay another day and go to our lawyers with us and talk about these documents that we've signed that he's named in, but he was 16 or 17 when we did them.
Right.
So he needs to hear about it and know what's going on. And I loved that that was my own personal takeaway from your book.
Excellent.
And I think that is so important for people. And again, doing it when you're 40, I mean, waiting, I'll do that when I'm 85. Well, you don't know what you're going to be like at 85.
And what you do at 40 is not what you're going to need to do at 60.
Right.
It's very different. So if you did it at 40 and you're 60, you need to take a second look.
Yeah.
You need to
what do you think is the most common either error in thinking or behavior or both that people...
Well, the most common is not doing anything.
Right.
That's the most common. So if anybody who's listening to this now says, okay, I didn't do anything, I need to go do something, then yes, please go do that. Get your powers of attorney, get your wills, get your advance directives, just get them, and talk to an attorney about what you need and what your desires are specifically. I'd say the second most common error is people who have done them, did them 10, 20, 15, 30 years ago, especially people who have little children. They panic. I want someone to take care of my kids if anything happens to me. I want to make sure they have money if anything happens to me. And that's wonderful. And then, I always say they take that and they shove it into their underwear drawer, and then you never see it again. And you need to take it out of the underwear drawer.
Like that old pair of underwear you used to be able to get into. But
exactly. This is where I held up the granny panties and say, you need the granny panties of the wills. It's fresh, it's clean, and it covers everything. That's what you need to do. So that's the second biggest problem is people don't update their documents. And boy, have things changed. There's a thing now, it's called RUFIDA. I wish I could remember what it stands for without looking it up. But what it's about is giving someone access to your digital information. If you are sick and incapacitated, which is really important, or quite frankly, if you're dead, right?
Yeah.
And that information, that acknowledgement that yes, I'm giving this person access has to be in those documents, not the password so much, but yes, this person has the authority to get into my digital assets. And then when your son comes, Margaret, show him where you keep your passwords, which, you know,
I don't keep them anywhere. I keep them in my head.
Right. And online isn't great. And in your head is even worse.
So what I did, I sort of, the night before the surgery, I went, wait a minute, what if something happens? And so I gave him the major passwords I could think about, and we both kind of cried. And then I said, you know, but I should have all those written down somewhere or kept somewhere.
I mean, everyone says don't write them down, but truthfully, if you can't get into your computer where your passwords are, not having them written down doesn't help you. Right. So you at least have to have your basic password somewhere where your loved one can have access to it, but legally also give them access to it in your documents. And that's new. That's not even in, I'm pretty sure that's not in my first book. It's probably in my second or third book. But things keep changing. And that's why you need to keep looking at these documents, say every 5 years or so, because life changes.
You know, I also, my dad was always really sad because after his dad died, and his dad died when he was 15, there was such family uproar about the will, but it ripped the family apart. And I think a lot of the suggestions that you make are trying to say, you know, you could be that family where siblings don't talk to each other anymore after someone is either you're having to decide about caregiving or you're having to decide about, you know, death issues or what's going to happen after death. It can rip families apart like nothing I've ever seen really before.
And so your work and my work are the same in that regard, because in the sense that communication is always going to be the key, right?
Right.
You have to tell your children, and it's so funny that you're saying this, because my mother's 94. She lives down the street from me, and she's a pip and a half. And your listeners can go see us on TikTok if you want. I do fun little videos with my mom all the time on TikTok. And that's all I do is videos with my mom, who's 94, and she's so hilarious. But I just said to myself, I said, although her will is very recent, I would say 5 years old, I want to look at it again, because I'm not sure it does what she wants it to do based on conversations that we've been having. So let's look at it, right? Let's talk to my siblings, and, you know, let's see you have to, at least, this is the other thing that you asked me that I sort of didn't mention, is people just, like you said, don't want to talk about this. It's scary. It's uncomfortable, but, you know, that's why my brother died 3.5 years ago. It also, you can't talk about it without your own feelings about mortality or getting ill or losing control or, you know, these things that we fear that we just distract ourselves from, and, you know, either have another beer or watch another baseball game or go out and, you know, hunt something or fish something so that we're in control, or vape or whatever we do, to distract ourselves from the reality. You don't get out of dying. So, I just think that these conversations they really can be trust builders. They can be things that offer clarity, that offer trust, that offer a sense, and as you point out, a sense of control to the person who is older and realizes that they have a disease that is going to weaken them or cause their life to be something that, frankly, you know, they wish hadn't happened to them, like Bruce Willis. But at the same time, it can, and we don't get to pick. So it's not like going to a restaurant and saying, "Oh, I'll have that." You know, it's just not like that. But it's in the same vein. It's much harder to have a disease than it is to have a conversation about what happens if I have a disease.
Right.
It's not that hard, my friends, which is why I wrote the 12 Conversations book. Yeah. It's really not that hard. It's 5 or 6 simple questions you need to ask yourself about what you want, what you think you want to do, and then get a lawyer to write it up for you. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Number one, there is nothing that is more mentally health challenging than being a caregiver. It is so hard. And I encourage you desperately to, especially if you have mental health benefits at your work or, in your insurance or whatever, to use them, because caregiving is a mental health stress. Do not think that it's not, because it is.
As many people found out during the pandemic, when it was all of a sudden 24/7 kind of
in your face. Yes, exactly. And if you are not yet a caregiver, but you see it coming down the road and you just happen to be going to a therapist, talk to them about that. Talk to them about this piece of your life that you see coming for you. And maybe if you're having challenges having that conversation with that person, or you yourself don't want to do it, but it has to be done, maybe you can get some tactics, some tools, because this is also about, sure, the legal tools are important. That's what I'm here to tell you about. Get those legal tools, but it's also the communication tools, the stress tools. There's so many tools that you need as a caregiver, and there's lots of people out there who can help you with that.
I also, before we stop, I want to make the point. You're right. Caregiving, you think, oh, I'm just taking mom to get her hair done, or, oh, I'm just taking dad to the post office, or I'm just doing this, or I'm just doing that. But those things add up. And you've got children of your own, or you've got a job of your own, or you've got a home of your own, or you live 2 hours away, or whatever it happens to be. You're right. We can minimize, oh, this shouldn't be, I'm just doing that. But when you're just doing 4 or 5 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 of those things a month, then that's a lot, and it changes your life, and it can definitely impact the relationship you're in with a spouse or a partner. And actually, they may be going through something similar with their parents. Or aunts or uncles or whomever, grandparents. So it's just a conversation about it, and to say, gosh, this is, maybe people say, oh, I'm loyal. This is what I'm supposed to do. But that doesn't mean you have to, you can't grieve it or feel different feelings about it, other than, I just have to do this. It's like, it's more complex than that.
Agreed. It is more complex than that. And you need to grant yourself the grace to understand that.
Yeah. Wow. How have you changed in taking care of these folks that you've loved or you've cared for, being an elder law specialist now? How have you changed, Cathy? Being an author, a speaker?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've changed my career. That's for one. Honestly, I don't know if this is terrible or not. Some part of me, my psychological part of me says it probably is, but I've actually become kind of a tough love caregiver in a lot of ways.
You mentioned that.
The empathy is great, but the practicality is hard. And it's okay for you to recognize that and to have expectations of others, not the person that you're caring for, the person who should be helping you, the person, even your partner. It's okay to have expectations of others. And I think when I'm teaching that often becomes a question. But my mom won't talk about this, or she won't go to the doctor or whatever. And I'm like, you have 2 choices. You can take the tough love perspective that this is what we're going to do if I'm going to be your helper, or you can tell them that they will have to suffer the consequences of that action, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
So tough love caregiving is hard, but it might be harder to be super empathetic and not allow yourself to realize that sometimes the person you're caring for also has to take the consequences of their actions. And
it's really, what comes to mind is sort of the age old, you have to parent your parents kind of thing. That one of the points, for example, you made in the book was, if there's a paid caregiver and your parent is being demeaning to them or saying things that aren't appropriate, that you have to say, it's better to say, Mom, you can't talk to Jane like that, or
right.
you need to apologize for what you just said, or
yes.
That's not appropriate. Jane will leave, and we really like Jane, and Jane does a good Jane does a good job with you and for you, and we can talk out what you don't like about Jane, but talk about it with me, and then maybe if we need to make another agreement with Jane, that's one thing, but don't play out your whatever is going on with you and say things to Jane that aren't helpful.
The other thing, and that's so important, yes. The other thing that I'd like to bring up that I have not changed my viewpoint about, but have really put into practice and want more women especially to do this, is get paid for your caregiving.
Yes.
If your parents would pay Jane, they should pay you.
Right.
Especially if you don't have Jane coming, if you're doing all of it. And if you are especially if you're taking a financial hit, if you have, gone from full-time to part-time work, if you have quit your job to take care of them, if you moved into their house and got rid of your apartment, or you're paying rent over there but living with them, if you're taking a financial hit and they have assets, they should pay you. And you get a signed, paid caregiver agreement to protect all the parties. But that's really important. There are far too many unpaid family caregivers who can and should be paid. And we are recycling this women get to the point then in their lives where they have no retirement, they have no savings, they have because they stepped out of the workforce to be a caregiver 1, 2, 3, 7, 9 times, right? And there are even ways to pay someone. If your parents have no assets and Medicaid they will pay family caregivers. There are lots of organizations that have cropped up. Again, I said, do things change in the last 2 to 5 years that are now making sure you can get paid as a family caregiver. So that's the other thing that I have learned and I have changed my mind about, that yes, this is great to be about love, but there's nothing wrong with getting paid.
Wonderful point, and very important point. So, well, after 6 years, I'm really glad we finally had this conversation. It sounds
too,
like
Margaret.
It's a little bit different a conversation than we would have had 6 years ago. So
very much, yes.
That's to everyone's benefit, I think. So I thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you to speak or to teach, or just to ask
so if you're in a workplace, in a corporate workplace, that would be awesome to have me come in and help teach your team about not only caregiving, but what benefits you may have at work that you're not using to help caregivers, and that what you could bring into work. If you want to just, look at my books, Cathy Sikorski, and see my name on the screen there, just type that in. I come up for the first 3 pages on Google, but I'm on Amazon. So all my books are available on Amazon. And my website, which is being recreated as we speak, is CathySikorski.com. And that's CathySikorski, CathySikorski.com. And anytime you have a question, Cathy.Sikorski@gmail.com, you are free to email me. I love to interact with people who have questions, and I will answer them as best I can and guide you to the resources that can really help you.
Cathy, I admire you so much. Thank you very, very much. And you are really damn funny. So, and you talked about that it's so important to keep your sense of humor.
Please, you guys, you got to laugh about this, because it's first of all, it's laugh worthy. And second of all, if you're not laughing, you're doing something else you don't want to do.
My dad used to say, because he just infirmity after disease after problem. He looked at me one time when he was about 81 or 2, and he said, Margaret, God's not supposed to give you more than you can bear, but I got to talk to God because he's way overestimating my abilities.
Yes, I'm on your dad's side. Yeah. If he ever figured out how to do that conversation, you should put that out there.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure he did, but thank you so very much.
So You're great welcome. To spend time with you. I really loved it.
Yeah, me too. Bye.
Bye.
That episode was packed with information. So I hope you got out a pencil and paper or whatever you use to take notes. But truly, her work is phenomenal, and she's so helpful to those of us who are caring for an older generation or for someone with chronic illness of any kind. She's really a gem. And if you reach out to her personally, she will get back with you. She's just that kind of person. Thanks so much for being here at SelfWork. I know that your time is very valuable, and I'm honored that you're spending it here. Please take very good care of yourself, your family, and your community. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been SelfWork.